In this video, I'm going to show you how to patch a large hole in drywall. I'm going to start out by measuring the hole size. And I'll get my measurements here. I'm going to go a little bit past the rough edge there. So I've got my measurement. And then I'm going to take my piece of drywall and cut it just a little bit larger than the hole size. And once I get my drywall patch made up, I can go ahead and draw the size of the patch on the wall. Now this is where I'm going to outline and cut a hole for the patch. So then my patch will fit exactly in the hole. So I take my oscillating tool. Now if you don't have an oscillating tool, you can use a knife, a utility knife, drywall saw. There's many other things you can use. You can even use a reciprocating saw. I just found this and I had it, so I'm going to go ahead and use this. It works very well for this type of work. And I'm going to cut all the way around, make sure I get all the paper off the back. And if it's a little bit larger than your patch, that's okay. Next, I got a piece of wood here that's cut to the width or the length of the hole, and I put a single screw in the center of this piece of plywood, and I want to hold that in place using the screw. And then I'm going to set up some screws on the side here. Okay, so then I hold my plywood in place, and once I've got my screws set, I can go ahead and pull out on the screw and drive the other screws in. This works for any size patch that you want to do. And I'm just going to back this up with some plywood. Put that in. Countersink the head of the screws just a little bit. Make sure that I've got them in deep enough so that I can use my drywall mud. I'll put a few more screws in here just to make sure it's holding pretty good. You can also cut your plywood to go the opposite way. That would work just as well. So now I can take my original screw out, and then I set my patch inside, and it fits pretty good. So I'm going to take some more drywall screws and put those into my actual drywall patch. Now for this drywall patch, I used the edge of the drywall. You can see along the edge here, it's got the taper for the edge. So I need to make a taper on this edge and all the way around the drywall for my drywall tape to sit. So I'll put my drywall tape on here and cut it to the size all the way around. I want to do 4 pieces of drywall tape. This will keep it from cracking in the future. Get my drywall tape cut. I'm going to mark it with a pencil just so I get the width of the drywall tape. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a bed for my mortar and tape. And drawing the lines here will tell me exactly how far I need to go to make my mortar bed. I'll mark that on each side of my patch. And that includes the patch. I put the tape in the very center, the line in between the wall and the actual patch. And then I got to do my patches for the top and the bottom, my drywall tape for the top and the bottom. And again, I'm going to mark how far that goes. This I don't have to mark because there's already a taper there, so I'm not going to need to make a bed for my mortar, but I have to do both sides the rest of the way around. So now I've got my marks all the way around. All I have to do is cut, and I don't want to cut too deep. All I'm doing is cutting the paper, the top layer of the paper of the drywall that's in the wall right now, and I want to cut all the lines that I've drawn. So you can go a little bit larger. It's okay to go a little bit larger just to make sure. And again, I don't have to cut the top piece of drywall because there's already a drywall bed there in the taper. So I'm going to take my oscillating tool and just go along here lightly. Don't want to cut too deep because then you'll weaken the drywall, but I'm just going to get below the surface of the paper, and then I'm going to get underneath it with my mudding knife and just take off, like I said, a layer of paper, and I'm going to replace that once I get all of this out of here, I'm going to replace that layer of paper with my drywall tape. And sometimes some of the drywall come out, but again, that's okay. I'm going to fill it back in. So I want to get it deep enough so that my paper will sit flush along here. That's fine. If I go too deep, you'll see that my screw is sticking out a little bit right here. So I'm going to have to, I'll come back in once I get done here and screw that screw in just a little bit deeper. Here's one that's a little too deep. This one's a little too deep, so I'll go ahead and screw those in just a little bit, just to get it below the surface, my new surface that I just created. So now I've got all the way around. I'm going to add a layer of mud to the mud bed that I just created and basically cover the whole patch here. And then I can set my drywall tape in the mud bed that I created all the way around. Now that I've got my tape in the mud, I want to take the drywall knife and I'll hold one side of the tape and I will embed the drywall tape into the mud or the spackling, and I'll wipe the excess back on top of the tape, but I want to make sure that the drywall tape is below the surface of the patch and the wall so that I can go over it and it won't have like a bulge or a step in the patch, and you won't be able to tell once I'm done. So now that I've got it embedded in the bed that I made for the tape, I can go ahead and just smooth everything out a little bit. And this is a few-day process. It's going to take a few days to get this done, unless you're using a fast set drywall mud. That will take a couple days just for the time to dry. Now I've got a good coat of mud on the wall here. I like to come back after I'm done just applying the mud with a little bit larger knife. This is a 14-inch knife. It'll span the whole distance of the patch, so that's kind of nice. Gives it a nice flat look, and I just go over it in different directions. It kind of drags the mud through some of the mortar bed that I've created, and I want to fan that out, get a nice feathering onto the existing wall. And I come back the next day, you can see it's kind of set in a little bit. Once it dries, it shrinks a little bit. So I'm going to knock down all the tool marks that I had, just lightly scrape over it with a putty knife. Once I get rid of all my tool marks, I can get more spackling, drywall mud, and put it over top of the patch. I'm filling in the parts that shrunk when it dried. And with each different coat, each additional coat, I do like to thin it out just a little bit, add a little bit of water to it. It tends to smooth and spread a lot more evenly and give you a nice smooth coat. So now we're back the next day, and I'm getting pretty close. So I'm going to sand this down a little bit, and I can put another coat on here once I get done sanding it if I need to. But a lot of times this could be the final coat, and I'd recommend putting some PVA primer or drywall primer over top of this before painting, just to make sure that the paint sticks well and doesn't soak in all of your paint once you go to paint it. Now there's a little spot here, so I am going to go ahead and put a little bit more on just to cover it and make sure that you can't even tell there's a patch done. And again, I've got this thinned down pretty good, and I'm going to go over it with my 14-inch drywall knife. And this should be the last coat. It's a real thin coat, and this will dry really quick once I'm done. And it'll just take a light sanding once this dries tomorrow. And I go over it in all different directions and fan this out a little bit. The more you fan it, the better it looks. So here we are. I've primered it and I've painted it, and you can't even tell. So that's how you patch a hole in drywall. I'm How To Bob. Thanks for watching.